Nadia Mitsopoulos.
ABC Radio Perth and WA.
And if you are in the agricultural industry and you want to talk about this, maybe you are doing something differently or you are tapping into a new market, I would like to hear from you. 1300 222 720. So let us now, I want to just head to the Shire of Murray. Because there is something very interesting happening there. They have established the Food Innovation Precinct. This is quite unique and a bit of a first, and interesting to see local governments getting very involved in this. So I want to go to Dr. Chris Vas, who's the General Manager of the Food Innovation Precinct. Good morning to you and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Nadia. Thanks for taking the time and thanks for having me on the show.
So tell me about this precinct. What is it exactly?
So the Food Innovation Precinct has been established by the Shire of Murray to address key pressure points for Western Australia. And that basically means how do we get commercialization of R&D? Just as Professor Peter Davies from Murdoch alluded, we need that commercial sense and commercial output to reach farmers and value add and producers. So that's one. How do we truncate and reduce the innovation cycle? So when I say that, I mean, how do we get our product to market much quicker? And ultimately, how do we get more trial in terms of new product creation and product development happening? So we've got this ecosystem set up in the Food Innovation Precinct: research, innovation, production.
And is this about the export market or is this about the local market?
It's for both. I think COVID has heightened everyone's attention to supply chain constraints, food security constraints, not just globally. But, we've experienced this in WA when, even our transport systems were constrained from the East Coast. We had bare supermarket shelves. So it's about addressing domestic food security, but also supplying into the overseas markets.
Okay, so what sort of crops are you focusing on?
So in partnership with Murdoch, for instance, where they've got a strong R&D capability in soil health, we'll be looking to focus on how do we improve soil health practices? How do we get more productivity and yields? So that's on the farm focus, but also in terms of getting end product to customers. We're looking at, how do we value add? How do we enhance nutrition from the different products? Peter talked about, needing more protein. How do we start that on a lab scale, move it to small batch production, and ultimately grow our manufacturing in the F&B space as well? So I think it's all across the supply and value chain is where we'll be looking to focus. And
so you're looking at what, grains, leafy vegetables, those kind of things?
Yeah, so let me give you an instance. So over the past 12 months, with support from the Australian government, we ran a prototype of an innovation program which we called X Protein Lab. We had about 6 companies participate in that program. We had 2 Australian experts, including one from CSIRO and 2 Singaporean experts, help these companies on their journey on protein. So one of those companies were focusing on lupins, right? So we grow about 60 to 70% of the world's lupin in WA, right? But we don't do a lot of value add. Lupin is a high protein product. It's got its issues around allergens and things, but how do we, enhance value from an end product, as Peter talked about, but also nutritional values, right? Because I think we talk about food security a lot these days, but I think where we sort of lose the focus is thinking about nutritional security. So that's where our focus is going to be as far as looking at crops and high-value products.
Okay. Dr. Chris Vas is my guest, the General Manager of the Food Innovation Precinct in Western Australia. Are there new technologies you're looking at?
There are new technologies, and probably I'll speak to 2 of them. And one is probably in Australia or West Australia first, where we've got one company called Eden Towers who's bringing some controlled environment agriculture technologies from Scotland to Perth, Australia. And they're going to be looking at commercial scale solar-powered indoor vertical farming, where a lot of research has been established around leafy greens. But Eden Towers are going to be taking it the next step, where they're going to be looking at high-value crops. So they're looking at bush foods, they're looking at specialty crops, they're looking at nursery crops. And that, again, from a new technology perspective, will have a huge impact on the resources that we use. For instance, if they can grow kale within their vertical farm in about 20 days, which takes about 6 weeks in the open farm, and uses 90% less water, that is a game-changing technology. So that's one.
Can you just explain a vertical farm?
Sure. So basically, if you just look at it, you take an open farm and you slice it up into layers. And instead of growing horizontal, you grow it vertical, right? So basically what happens inside an indoor vertical farm is you're creating climatic conditions which mimic the outside. So whether it's light, whether it's humidity, whether it's temperature, whether it's water, it's all mimicked inside a vertical farm, which is enclosed. So you don't have external or externalities from environment that have an impact on your growth cycle. So what that means is you can control the growth cycle. You're not modifying and playing around with the plant. You're just playing around with the environmental conditions inside that farm. What that does is it requires low to no pesticide use. Because you're controlling temperature, you're controlling humidity, you're controlling water flow, your plant and your crop is growing at a much better rate than what it would in the outside. This
is very interesting, a conversation that I reckon I'm going to continue to have, and I think I'll be talking to you again, Dr. Vas. I appreciate your time. This is interesting. He's the General Manager of the Food Innovation Precinct in WA.